thanks for coming. This is one of those classes. My name's Trevor. I'm our general manager here. It's just one of those classes. I know you care about your yard if you come to this one, because it's not a fancy schmancy plant class, but I want to take care of my yard and be ready for 2023 class. So thanks for taking the time. It's not going to rain today. It's nice and warm in here, a little bit of warmth. So I turned the heat on, but I probably could have skipped it today. But thanks for coming. I thought we'd kind of start off just talking a little bit about plant hardiness, because I think we get to this time of year and folks are not quite sure what's okay to leave out, what's might die this winter, what do I have to worry about, where am I at. This is a really strange year with the weather cycle, to be honest with you. I think everybody's seen not just the smoky haze for the last few weeks, but a really wet spring and a really dry summer. This is the longest drought we've ever had for 5 months. Not drought like we're lacking for water, we got plenty of that still, but it makes it tough on plants. You know, plants as a general rule are really resilient creatures, but two things I get a lot of customers coming in these days. I didn't water enough, you know, which isn't the end of the world. You know, my deciduous trees turned color a month ago and started dropping leaves. You know, is it going to be okay? On the other end of that, a lot of evergreen stuff, a lot of brown and yellow down the center, not out towards the tips. You know, both those are pretty natural processes, especially with the way the weather went this year. When we have brown in the center, it's just flagging. All conifers are evergreen, but that doesn't mean we keep our needles and everything for all eternity. It's usually 3 years. So if you're looking out at a cedar in the yard, a fir, a spruce, a pine, you know, anything evergreen, you're going to see probably a little bit more brown than you've seen before. The wetter the spring, the drier the summer, a little bit more flagging. It's not the end of the world. If we have brown out towards the tip, then we got a problem. You know, we got something else going on. But as long as we're just down the center, maybe a little bit out those interior branches, but not anywhere on the tips, don't worry about the evergreen. On the other side of that is a lot of deciduous stuff, and we're talking about, you know, from dogwood trees to, you know, twig dogwoods to anything that loses its leaves. You know, yes, if you water a little bit right now, you're probably just getting into peak fall color time. If you didn't water enough this summer, again, it's not the end of the world. Things might have gone dormant a little bit early. You drive around right now, a lot of cities, a lot of parks, you know, a lot of that is changing far before our yards do. Drive up, well, we can't drive, well, I think we can drive up Highway 2 finally now, the smoke is gone.
But now there's snow up there.
But you drive up Highway 2 and it's the same thing. It's a really common question I get every year this time of year. Why do I drive up, you know, in the middle of nowhere and see some natural vine maple off the hillside off 2, and it's just the most glorious orange-red color. One of my yard turns yellow-brown. I don't get anything. So it's that fine line. You know, nature's going to take care of itself. Maybe we go dormant early, but I'm always going to get the brightest color out when I'm a little bit drought stressed. If I'm in the yard and I water, I'd start to shut my watering off in mid-late August so that I can get a little nicer fall color. If we're still running sprinkler systems and all that, probably not going to get quite as bright as we would with Mother Nature, okay? So those are kind of two we see every year a little bit, but I think this year, I know my neighborhood in Everett, there's a lot of yards that, not tired in a negative way, they just look tired. You know, they've been through fall, it's about a month early, you know, things are already dropping leaves. You know, they'll be good as new next year. Plants are pretty resilient creatures. The other half of our kind of little microclimate here is zone. So who knows what zone we are? Anybody want to step up? What zone are we?
8B.
She says 8B, all right, and that's what the book will tell you. 8B means I'm hardy to about 20 degrees, so who thinks it's never going to get below 20 degrees up here? I'm not going to raise my hand because I would not put 8B in my yard. All the things that are 8 are things that died last winter in my yard and I had to replace again. So keep in mind hardiness. The books will tell you one thing, and yes, the average temperature, and yes, there's global warming, and maybe we're getting to the point where zone 8 is pretty sweet, but there's some cool plants that are zone 8, and those are the things that I'm in containers trying to protect a little bit if it does get cold, or I'm not necessarily spending my money on as many of them, because I think I went 0 for 5 last winter at my house in Everett with some things. So zone 7 would be my own zone. You go at zone 7, I'm not going to worry about it. If it's zone 8, then we're going to talk a little bit today about maybe some things that we can help to protect those guys if we do get cold, because it's never, you would agree with me, it's never going to be 10 degrees for a month. That just doesn't happen up here. But you know, 10, 15 degrees for 4 or 5 nights in a row is gonna do those plants in. That's kind of what happened to a few of mine.
Is it time to bring a gardenia in?
I'll do questions after the class, but it's not quite time yet. But we'll talk about that. Okay, so we'll do questions at the end. So everybody kind of understand, you know, kind of how we harden things off. We got our zone kind of talked about. Now they're probably freaking out, like, what am I going to go home and throw in the garage? Don't worry about it for a while. Watch the weather here. You know, this class to me, we kind of started this a few years ago, and I'm a little OCD, so I'll say that right off the top. You know, just because I walk around and vacuum every single bit of debris out of my yard doesn't mean you have to. And I try not to do that as much anymore. But this class to me was getting ahead for spring. You know, what could I do right now to get my garden prepared for winter, and you know, probably get a little jump start on spring. You know, we can wait and do it when it's maybe a little bit warmer and probably wet this time of year, or we can go out there in February when I think it might be a little bit colder and probably still wet. So we can get a little bit ahead right now. If we kind of follow the handout there, we kind of set up stations, and I'm going to go fast and furious for you a few topics that I kind of think about in my yard here when we get to fall. And some of these things you might say, I don't even worry about that, I haven't seen one forever. Other things you might be like, oh yeah, that's the problem at my house. So first, I always bring up slugs. I should ask, who doesn't have slugs? And you'd be lying if you said you don't. So slugs are always a good one. You know, this is the time of year where they're looking for places to overwinter, underneath debris, underneath leaves. As all of our things go dormant, they're going to hide out, lay some eggs, and we'll have even more for next year. So are you going to go out and get every slug this fall? Probably not, but I would consider, especially if you know your yard and certain plants that are maybe a little bit more slug prone, start getting that stuff protected now. You know, we carry a number of different slug controls. We don't have anything chemical anymore. I banned the old metal aldehydes here a long time ago because that's some nasty stuff for wildlife, kids, pets, all the rest of it. So all of our stuff is going to be natural. These are things that we don't have any chemical in. They're very effective if you use properly, but does anyone know that brand name Sluggo? You know, that's an easy one to remember, I think. Good marketing play, whoever came up with that name. But it's essentially iron phosphate. That's what it is. It doesn't matter what brand I buy. If I look for a natural organic slug control, it's always going to be iron phosphate. That's a great, honestly, natural, the best slug control there is for natural. It works I think it works better than metal aldehyde, at least it does at my house. Sometimes if you got the, you know, the old Deadline, the baits, and the gels, and I think they come in all sorts of forms. What happens is the slug hits it, and you walk out the next morning and see a bunch of dead slugs everywhere. Iron phosphate's kind of cool because they kind of run across it and keep going, and they go off somewhere in the bush and hide and die in peace, and I don't have to look at them the next day usually either. So it works very well. I think a lot of people put too much of it down. I'm going to be brutally honest. Don't waste your money. One of these jars covers a lot of area, and especially if we're, you know, putting little rims around susceptible plants, you're going to save yourself a lot of money by being careful how much you use, because you don't need very much. I see some people like, wow, she just got a 5-pound jar last week. She must have the world record for slug count, or she's putting too much down in certain areas. So it does work very well. I'll show you a couple things. So everybody, there's nothing wrong with the OG Sluggo, we call it here. That's the original one, been around forever. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you're using, it's kind of what I use too. But you know, man can't leave things alone, and we have to keep trying to make improvements. So we have Sluggo Max. Now, if I had a lot of yard, more than I do even, or a big acre, this is the way to go. And this is no different than Sluggo, but it has a different attractant in it. And if you use Sluggo, the hardest part is, I'm used to shaking a little bit and doing this. You're going to do like 1/10 that amount in the same amount of area. So I mean, I think this little 1-pant jar is literally listed for 10,000 square feet of slug coverage. So, you know, yeah, it's a little bit more money, but if you use it right, this is the way to save a little bit extra cash too, because this is going to go a lot more ways. But if you dump out your usual amount, then you're like, well, I use twice as much than I used to, and you're going to spend a little more. So keep that in mind. We will always have both those around, but I try to get customers who do use a lot of this. This may be a good way for you to go. It's got a great new attractant in it. The other one is going to be some slightly different stuff. So this is a product by Bonide. I've used this too. This is iron phosphate, same as Sluggo, but it also has spinosad or spinosad in there as well. So if I want to do slugs and take care of some ground creatures that I don't want, naturally all organic again, then maybe this is the choice instead of just Sluggo. Does that make sense? You're going to get a little bit more with that if we fought some other things in the ground. And then some folks, we don't get a lot of this, and some people like it as light as a feather, this old diatomaceous earth. So this is another old organic type control that I can sprinkle around, same thing as Sluggo, and get very effective on a number of different things as well as slugs and snails. Okay? So we good? Anybody got a question on slugs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I use Sluggo around like my hospice.
Yep.
I have a lot of slugs in the lawn, especially when it rains.
Yep.
Little babies.
Yep.
Can you sprinkle that in the lawn itself?
You could, it's not going to hurt anything. You absolutely could do that. And that's where, to me, maybe that max might be a little better. You know, I don't know how big your lawn is. You know, an average yard is 3,000 square feet lawn. You know, I still don't even need to use half that little jar if I can dust it out there. Yeah, that'll help. You know, they're usually different kinds of slugs that are in the turf, and sometimes they're not doing a huge amount of damage, but certainly getting them out of there, I'd rather do that than step on them all the time. So there you go. Yes.
How often?
You know, that's a great question, because it doesn't really matter which one of those I choose, to be honest. If it's raining, like I hate to warn you, it's starting to rain, and we're going to rain just like we always do through the winter. You got probably 30 days, you know, and I don't really care about, you know, late November, December, January, February. To me, it's getting you down one dose right now. Kind of gets me protected a little bit going into winter, and hopefully I'll get rid of some before they lay eggs. And then right coming out of winter is just as important. We would do another application as those plants start to come back out of the ground.
So one dose now and then
One dose now, and then for me, you know, again, it's not every plant in my yard. I'm not going to tell you that, but I know certain things. I love dahlias. I don't dig those. I've got certain perennials I like. They will be on there as soon as they come out of the ground. You know how it goes. So those are the things I'll be out there first part of March, scrape my compost away, get my food down, and then get my rim of protection on there, so I'm good to go as the things wake up. Yes.
You know, and is that good for those little teeny tiny slugs that get on your lettuce?
Yep. Any kind of slug, period. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We do some traps around here for helping out Department of Agriculture, so we kind of monitor which ones are on the nursery property here. But yeah, you use that for anything in the yard, including snails too. So.
And you can put that around your lettuce, your
Yep, vegetable garden. Yeah, totally safe. That's the best thing. And not having to worry about any of that. Yeah, especially someone mentioned the birds. That's an important one too. Yes.
That one that you said is good for other bugs too. Does it help with potato bugs?
It will help. But again, be careful what you wish for, because potato bugs are all over the place, but they're essential decomposers. We need those in the soil to help break down other stuff too. So if we've got 1 billion of them, you could probably lose a few, but we don't want to get rid of all of them. Yeah. Okay, so we got a little slugs, a little weeds, you know, and I don't know, you know, again, what condition your lawn is or your landscape's in, you know, coming out of winter. Being kind of OCD, I don't have a lot of weeds ever because I kind of keep up on it before they go to seed. But you know how the weather goes around here. We got one day of rain. I'll give it 1 week, and popweed's going to be popping all over the place here. And it sits there all winter and flowers, and then you got 10, and then you got 100, and now we got 1,000,000 of them, and they just keep going. So if you want to get a head start on weeds, this is something like probably today's no rain, and you're going to have to find a day here in the next week or two, but you're going to get weed control done like now. This isn't something to put off. If you want to get some spraying done, we got to do it when it's still warm, and it's got to be dry. The products there will tell you specifically how long it needs to be on to be rain proof. So it's not like you need 24 hours of sunshine. It's not that, but the longer you wait, the cooler it is. The herbicide's all about getting on the foliage, translocating down to nuke the root system, right? And if it's not moving and sap's not flowing, you're not going to get the root system, and maybe it dies off on the top, and then next spring we got it right back up off the ground again. So again, this is one of those, probably a little bit now and a little bit kind of right coming out of the winter. I'm going to show you a couple, you know, a couple different options here for weed controls. You know, I've been on a mission to kind of ban, I don't want to offend anybody, but the Roundups, the glyphosates, the chemical weed controls of the earth, you're not going to find that stuff at Sunnyside. So I'll just start with that. You know, there's a lot of things that we tidy up every year. You know, not to say our entire store is organic, but the majority of it is, and we kind of eliminate some of those systemic options, honestly, when it comes to weed control. This is the same stuff I use in my yard, and I'm telling you, if you keep up on it, there's a couple little pesky weeds that are tough to get. Horsetail would be one, buttercup will be another one. You know, but all the majority of the common stuff we see are pretty easily taken care of with something on the natural side. So 2 options up here. Bonite is a company we do the majority of our pharmacy with. It's a good family company back on the East Coast. I like the fact their labels, if I look at those bottles, can you see they call it the shoulder? So you can see the label. It's always going to be brown if we're looking at something that's natural, organic, non-systemic, non-chemical, all the rest of it. You'll see a few things in there that have colored labels. Those will designate can't be listed as something natural or organic. So the weed controls we have are. So these are really easy to remember because I have Dead Weed Brew. So the Captain Jack's on the label there. He's the organic master. And I got Lawn Weed Brew. So you can probably guess, what's this going to do? Dead Weed Brew is going to nuke just about anything it touches, including my lawn. If I use it on my lawn, I will kill my grass. So do not put this on your turf. If I want to kill broadleaf weeds and leave my lawn alone, I'm going to buy Lawn Weed Brew. This will be safe to use. This is what I walk around and spot spray with off and on all through the season, and that's very, very effective. Just a second, we'll do questions. So real quick, Lawn Weed Brew is just iron. So this is a specific form of iron. The grass can absorb a massive amount of iron. Other plants cannot. So when I spray this on there, I shrivel the dandelion, I kill this, I kill that, but my grass turns a darker black green, then it kind of feeders out as we get some water on it. Does that make sense? So you'll see the color difference. What have I done when I go out? I don't get very many, but say in spring, I might find 50 of them in my 3 lawns, and I'll look out. It looks kind of funny for a couple days because I got like dark green polka dots on light green lawn, you know, as we come out of winter. So that's the one for lawn. This is what we call a selective weed killer. So there's no magical product that's going to kill one grass and not another. I have to choose either kill everything with something non-selective, or I buy a selective weed killer like that will kill broadleaf plants but not turf. Does that make sense? Not to turn this into a weed. I do a weed killer class in the spring. So that's lawn. Dead Weed Brew, I love the smell of it. My wife would disagree with it, but it smells like clovey, garlicky. It's all kinds of fun oils in it. And this has been awesome in my driveway, my pathways, the curbside. This has nuked everything. You know, I put it on there in a hot day and it's an hour. I walk back out like, holy smokes, the whole driveway's clean again. So even clover, oxalis, some of the harder stuff to take care of, this will nuke it. Is it going to kill a horsetail? Yeah, it'll shrivel the top, but I don't think you're going to get the root system with it. You're going to have to get it a few times. But that's a very effective one because, again, in light of, you know, glyphosate or something systemic, that's your other choice, you know, where you're going to have to get some things. You know, we go to brush killer, which we do carry one Bonite brand of that. That's what you're going to have to step up to. That's chemical. There's nothing organic about brush killer. But that's what I've got to go out and horsetail, buttercup, some of the harder things like that, or to kill shrubs, bamboo, blackberries, all the rest of it as well. Okay. I'll just mention this. Well, let's do one more here. So this is what we would call post-emergent. I have a little weed growing out of the soil, right? I've got some leaves that I can actually physically spray on to soak in the product and hopefully kill the roots. Okay. So that's post-emergent is what we call that. The other option is we get something pre-emergent. Let's say that I've cleaned my bed the time. It's totally weed free. I'm putting some mulch down. I don't want to deal with, you know, weeds coming back quite as much. Then we look for a pre-emergent type product. There's a lot of old school stuff. Again, we do not carry Casseron. We don't carry Amaze. We don't carry all that stuff with the chemical in it anymore. There's a couple things options that we would have. This is Weed Beater Complete. This is the only thing I get in for lawns. This is not something you're going to put out on your driveway or, you know, that kind of situation, just for a lawn. And I don't know that I'd do it now, but I always just show a bag of it this time of year, because if you're beyond me, OCD in the lawn, and you don't want to walk around and pluck, weeds out all the time or spot spray. If you came out of winter and sprayed once and had no weeds, and I put this down as a granular on my turf area, that is both a post and pre-emergent, so that would kill existing weeds in that lawn, and it makes a film on the soil that no weeds germinate through. Does that make sense? It doesn't last for years. You know, you're going to do this spring and fall probably if you're going to go that route. Just be real careful when you do it, because it's going to tell you right on that bag. Everybody should read the bags before they put it down. If I'm going to seed my grass, I can't use something like that, because what's going to happen? The seed's not going to grow. So this to me is a tough one for timing. You know, do you do it in the fall? Do you do it in the spring? Do I put my seed down, wait and do this in June, you know, as we get into summer, and then you're good to go for the rest of the year? I mean, there's some options, but again, that's probably the more chemical style route. I use a lot of corn gluten. Does anyone use corn gluten? Not one. Wow, I guess a few people. You know, I'll be frank, it kind of sucks the last 5 years because biodiesel has taken up the raw material for corn gluten. So my little bag that used to cost me $10 now costs $20 to buy. So it's not cheap, but it's very effective. I think you'd be surprised. A lot of organic lawn-based foods or weed-in feeds, the natural style, that's what it is. It's corn gluten in a bag, because that breaks down into fertilizer. But when we put corn gluten down, that dissolves, makes that film on the soil. And again, I've got a natural pre-emergent that's going to keep a lot of stuff from growing through it. So have I ever put it on my lawn? No, I don't actually. I prefer this little bit of spot spray, my organic lawn food. The rest of it, I put this on my beds. So every time I want to mulch, compost, put bark down, whatever we're talking about, I will broadcast that out on the existing soil. Again, it's not going to kill weeds that are already there, so I've already weeded that bed, put that down, put some mulch over the top of it. I'm good to go through the winter time. I got to probably do that again spring, fall if I really want to go OCD, but it's pretty effective for a natural product with no chemical in there at all, if you can find corn gluten. I did put that on special for the class, so you get it for 16 bucks if you want to try a bag, and that does quite a bit of area, even that small bag too, so that's on a little extra special today. So I think that'll get you weeds. And you got any questions on that? Because I'm sure there's a couple. Yep.
Are all of those safe to use around a well?
All of those, take this one off the board. Yes, the rest of it is. Yeah, you just this is. Yeah, you can't do that. I wouldn't.
Sprays they're safe to use around.
Sprays, you wouldn't have any ground residual at all. Yeah, you'd be fine. This is again, I'm not up here trying to preach on the soapbox and tell you what to do with your yard, but I'm just an anti-weed and feed guy. We're never going to carry that here at Sunnyside. I don't like scats. I don't like any of it, because if you're going to, even if you wanted to use a chemical, I would rather have you buy, their little bottle of Weed Be Gone or whatever you're comfortable with, and not broadcast that death over the whole property. Put it in a sprayer and walk around and just spray the little teeny spots where you need it. You're probably okay, but you just put it in the hopper and just spread it over the whole property. It's just not the way to go. I don't think that's where we get that stuff going into the groundwater, the stream, the lake, the river, the sound, and all the rest of it too. Okay. So let's go. We'll do perennials here real quick, and I'll say this. I'm not telling you to run home and do this today. I've done a few of mine already that were getting tired. The last week or two, I've had a few things I've cut back. My hostas are almost officially snot. They're not quite melted to the ground yet, but they're getting pretty close. So there's some things you could get ahead on. You're not going to hurt it by cleaning up a little bit now and picking away at it in the coming weeks. But I bring this up because I think this is an important fall thing. We talk slugs, we talk bugs, we talk debris, all that stuff. You have to find your comfort line. I call it the balance between neat and natural, and that's what I'm fighting in my own brain. I'd rather have everything just spotless, start over again for spring, but leaving leaf debris, great mulch. Some bugs, beneficials live in there. Hummingbirds need protein in the winter. They got to grab some food somewhere. There's a lot of things, reasons not to clean up the entire yard, but I would really look at the landscape. If it was my advice, look at what you have and go, what do I worry about every single spring? That gets slugs, this gets bugs, this has been struggling with disease, this year. Whatever it is, those are the ones you got to get everything out of there. You know, if I had a disease on a perennial, a shrub, whatever it is, those are the leaves I'm sweeping up and they are out. I'm throwing them in the compost and sending them to the heap in the sky. I'm not going to let that sit and fester so I get right back the same problem again next year. So the debris cleanup on perennials, I think is important. I think we'd all agree that the majority of slugs go straight for the perennials as they jump out of the ground in spring. So look at the things that are prone, or look at all of those. If I can get the debris out of the crown and leave myself a nice clean circle, that slugs are not going to come and find somewhere to lay a zillion more eggs that hatch out again next year, and then I got the same problem again. Okay, is that kind of working for everybody? So do I cut everything back? Yes. You know, does everything go spotless anymore? I try not to be that bad, although most of it does. But I brought a couple in just to kind of show you. You know, this is a heuchera. Anyone who knows me, I got heuchera-itis, so I have to bring a heuchera into the class. But, you know, this is a great example of a beautiful evergreen perennial, which I'll have class on this in a couple weeks, actually, on evergreen perennials. But, you know, what do I do with that right now? You know, yeah, I just cut a bunch of mine back a little bit in the last 2 weeks that had tired foliage laying on the ground. I want to open up, you know, I want to look at all this beautiful fresh growth all through the winter, and then spring we do the same thing again. So I'm not going to cut everything off and let it go down to the nubs. That's not why I bought this. This should have that color on it no matter how cold we get and snowy and the rest of it. I'm going to get to look at that all winter. But I'm going to absolutely go along here and either pinch these off or use my pruners and clean off some of this older tired foliage. I get better sun, I get better air, I get to enjoy the color, okay? So heucheras, you know, there's some other ones we'll talk about in the evergreen perennial class, but that's kind of one would be evergreen. Who's got grasses? Anybody got grasses? We got a few. You know, so understanding here in the fall, you know, what grasses are perennial that will go dormant and what are going to keep their color in the winter is essential, because I don't ever want to cut this back except coming out of winter is the safe time. So I'm not doing a thing to this. You know, cutting it in half's not going to help me. I guess if you're really OCD, we could reach in here and pull the 4 brown blades out if you want to do that. But I'm going to leave this alone and attack this in spring. If I have a perennial grass, you know, this isn't quite there yet, but I tried to find one that's showing the signs of fall. You know, this is going to go totally brown. You know, do I have to walk out that minute and cut it off? No. But at some point, you know, November, December, January, February, before March 1st, yes, I want to make sure I get out there and chop that thing off 2, 3, 4 inches above the soil so that it can start over again. If I don't, this is never going to go away, and I'll have brown with fresh growth coming up through it, and it's going to be impossible to clean that up next summer, you know, kind of thing, okay? So these are easy. You know, grab yourself a clump of hair, you know, the hedge clippers, and zip it off. My big ones, sometimes they even get the sawzall out, you know, and you can cut them that way too. But it's an easy one to clean up. And again, it's not today or next week. You know, at some point here, when you're like, all right, I'm ready to clean this bed up, sweet, let's get the grass, chop it up, throw it in the yard waste, the compost bin, and then off we go for the next season, okay? The 2 types of perennials, just a second. So the 2 types of perennials, and you can tell my chemistry college education, I put fancy words in there, sticks and mushers. So yes, hosta turns to snot. I hate to say that word again, but that's kind of what it is. You just kind of grab the glove and sweep it up and throw it in the yard waste and see you again next year. Really easy to clean up. You know, are my hostas quite this snotty yet? No, not quite. They're getting close here, but in the next few weeks they are. Easy one. And because again, those are slug prone, absolutely I want that out of there. I don't want a bunch of debris sitting around my hostas, okay? So those are mushers. There's other types of perennials like that literally are just to the ground, and I'd have to look and go, oh yeah, there's a bunch of eyes there that I'll get to growth on next year. You know, with 2 young boys, I'm like, don't step on my hostas. You know, they're running around the yard even though the plants are dormant. So maybe I put a stake or something to say, don't walk in here, please. The other half, I just call them sticks. You know, we have rudbeckia, you've got coneflowers, you've got a vast majority of the good pollinator perennials I think we use around here. Yes, they go dormant, but if I don't clean it up, what do I have? You know, a woody kind of thin stalk where the flower was. I got some melted foliage that sticks to the ground. And again, do I have to clean it all up tomorrow? No. I've already done my sneeze weed is one I brought in here because I can see this is already flowered. You know, I'm going to get a little wildlife benefit. The birds, you know, grabbing some seeds here as we get into the fall and early winter. I've already got my green at the base that's going to sit there all winter, and then spring, here we come again. So I know today, in a week, in a month, at some point, I'll be cutting all those stick type perennials off. If you want to make sure you don't step on them, maybe we leave the little stick there, you know, and not necessarily cut it to the ground here in the fall. We can do that coming out of winter, you know, if that's the way you want to do it, kind of either way, okay? So that kind of, we'll talk a lot about, we'll do a little bit of this at the pruning class in a couple weeks when we're talking about pruning and things, but I think perennial one fits in a little bit more with this class, you know, kind of making some choices. What do you want to clean up? What do you want to protect here going into next year kind of deal? Okay, you have a couple questions?
Yeah, I just want to ask you about clematis. I've
Yep.
got different varieties of them,
Yep.
and I cut them all back. The one is very prolific.
Yep.
It goes over the fence and to the neighbor's, the ground on the
Yep.
neighbor's
Yep.
fence. And I cut it way back, but I've had it for many years, and there's so many stems. It just is too
It's a
much,
mess.
and I try
Yeah.
to thin it out. But I'm having problems. Should I
Yeah.
be thinning out the old stuff?
Yeah, I mean, clematis is almost a discussion on its own because if anyone else got clematis in their yard, because clematis, I would want to know what variety it is because clematis is very specific, group A, group B, group C. Essentially,
Right.
do I bloom on new wood, old wood, or both woods?
Yeah.
You know, for us, we try to carry all both woods. You can do whatever you
Well,
want
and
to
I
it.
have some of all of
So
those.
cut them back harder is what I would say. If you have an old wood bloomer, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of flowering, and it would happen later in the season.
Well, some of
but
the
the
stems are
clematis, you want to get down to like 3 foot. I mean,
Well, I don't have trouble cutting it down.
Yeah.
I cut it down and throw it over the neighbor's
Yep.
yard and roll it up and
Yep.
get it out.
Yep.
But I mean, some of the old stems
Oh,
are
yeah.
that old.
you can thin some
You
of those
still wanna
out.
keep those?
Yeah, I mean, clematis is a perennial. If you cut some of that old wood out of there, it's going to shoot fresh growth out of that root system next
Okay.
year. So, I mean, if you really want to rejuvenate it, I think most people don't prune their clematis enough. How's that? You know, we want to
Well,
really...
I kind of have slash and burn at this
Yeah.
time of the year. It's
Yeah,
not
that's the way to go because
Yeah.
vines are vigorous creatures.
Yeah.
You want to contain the vine. Cut it
Yeah,
back really
okay,
hard.
thank
The
you.
worst thing is going to happen is, you know, again, oh my, I didn't realize that's only an old wood bloomer. That'll make the note for next year like, okay, I can't go down quite that much. I got to leave a little bit more wood so that it
Well,
blooms.
that's the other thing. Somebody
Yeah.
told me that the roots they had wanted to transfer it, and
Yeah.
it had all rotted underneath. Does that happen? How do you know? I mean, it was
Well,
still growing outside, but when he went to transplant it or whatever, he
had
found
some
it was
rotten
all
wood on
rotted.
it. Yeah, there might have been a bad crown. It wasn't clematis wilt.
Well, should they be
Yeah.
covered to, you know, like peonies? You know how you're not
Oh,
supposed to cover them?
You could mulch a clematis. Wouldn't hurt to mulch it, but I don't
'cause
think you'd
throw-
have to.
I just throw
Yeah.
stuff on everything except my peony.
Yeah, then you can kind of spread it
Okay.
around the spring. Yeah. Okay, so we got that. Let's whip through. See what we're doing. We're getting out of time here. So let's whip through some of these other bullet points real quick. So who's interested in storing bulbs? Got a few people. So is it dahlias? Is it cannas? Is it all the above? A, B, C, and D? You know, it's not. I'll start with this. It's not typically the cold is the issue up here. It's the wet. So I don't pull dahlias. I'm lucky. I should knock on wood that I don't lose mine. But I knew where I put them. I had a huge amount of built-up soil when I built our gardens, and so I have not had to dig them. There's a couple that come from grandmother that's long gone, and those get dug, at least part of them. So I make sure I've always got a piece going to next year. You probably could start pretty quick. I think we've got some rain coming. Most people try to get this late October to mid-November. You know, even waiting for one good hard frost isn't the end of the world on the dahlias. But if you're going to dig them, you know, you're going to dig them. You're going to dig up that massive clump of tubers. You're going to get them in the garage, get them dried out, get them stored in something. I would recommend you go on the internet and look a little bit because you can find a zillion different ways to do this. I've had some people in the crawl space in the basement. We got the back bedroom that has no heat. We have underneath the cupboard. We got the garage. We got a box. We got a bag. You could do a zillion things with the bulbs, but try to find a really clean media. And if you're worried about storage rot or fungus issues, I would recommend dipping them before you store them. So if we brought them in, maybe you make up a little natural copper fungicide bath, and we kind of soak the tubers in there, lay them out on some towels, let them dry real good. Then we can pack them in something. We just got this beautiful new clean straw in. You know, there's vermiculite. There's newspaper. You could find a zillion different ways to do dahlias, kind of depending on what your situation is. We don't want heat on them in the winter. They don't have to be near light. It's not that at all. It would be, to me, somewhere very cool that's just above freezing. You know, that 35, 40 degrees is ideal. You know, maybe it's, like I said, in the crawl space. I've done that before. I'm usually in the garage. It's a really easy one because we got unheated garage, and it doesn't get very warm in there ever in the winter time. So there's
you can get away with not taking on.
Well, you're going to find out. I mean, that's kind of, you know, if I rewind my own brain 20 years, this is the same discussion between my left and right brain. Like, should I leave them? Should I dig them? I don't mind doing either. I don't want to lose them. I'm worried about it. I mean, there's a zillion things. For me, it was honestly about more of just me personally, my grandmother and my mom. It's like, okay, I'm never probably going to be able to get that dahlia again. We can't even figure out the name of it. It reminds me of grandma. I don't want to lose it. So that is one that absolutely gets dug, divided, stored. The other ones, I'm like, if it goes, I'll go pick out another one I can try in the yard. I'm not as worried about. Like I said, I've been lucky where I'm at because I know my soil. If you've got clay, you know, down a foot, you're not going to probably get your dahlias back. I'll tell you right now. If we've got a 1.5 or 2 foot of really good soil before a sandy side, you're probably going to be okay. I mean, I don't come and yell at me if it doesn't come back, but that, you know, that's the decision. Is, do you want to ensure you've got that dahlia back? You know, I go to the Flower and Garden Show every year. I share dahlias with people in the society. I know if I was like, hey, I got a spot for a new one might didn't come back sweet, I want to try that one, you know, and I can go pick out a new one to try. Yes.
What about in containers? I have a couple of dahlias.
Yeah, in containers I would. The drainage is going to be good, but watch the weather. I don't have any problem with leaving dahlias out in pots in the winter, but if we got down, I'd probably say about 25 degrees and it's going to last for more than a day or two, I would take that pot and I'd shove it in the garage for a few nights, you know, just to make sure it doesn't get super, super cold. The worst thing would be desiccation, and I fight this at my yard. I got huge old 4-foot eaves on an old 50s house. You can't tuck it underneath that eave and forget about it, because if it gets dry and we freeze, we got no dahlia left, okay? So we want to make sure it gets water.
So do you cover them? I mean, after they've died back, or you cut them back, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm a newbie with this.
Yeah.
Do you cover them with anything?
No, the pots, I mean, if you wanted to be, you know, a little extra protection, put some compost on the top of the pot for the winter, some straw or something real simple. I wouldn't get too crazy. Just in the container, we're just not going to be quite as insulated. So that would be, okay, we're getting super colder for the week. Let's just throw it in the garage for a few nights.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
The little calla lilies.
Yep.
So they should be
No,
dug up.
No,
and then
that
put in
one I'll
straw.
tell you, because I've tried. I don't give you any chance of having those colored ones come back. White, yes. I've had whites for years and never done anything to them. But anything black, yellow, orange, pink, purple, red, all those really cool new ones, got to dig the bulb for sure. Yeah, and you'll have those are easy to get back in the ground next April and get them growing again. That's an easy.
In the winter, so I
dig
dug
'em up.
them,
Yeah.
and they're dried out now.
Yep.
Do I just store them in?
Same thing. Yeah, you get a little
straw
you
in the
put a little
garage?
straw, any of those. You follow the kind of the same thing with dahlia. If you got any kind of media, that's just make sure it's clean, you know, dry, and then boom, we'll let them back out there next year. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Protecting the lawn. You know, I do a lawn class a few weeks ago. I won't spend a lot of time, but the things I'm always worried about right now is mainly thatch disease. Who let their lawn go brown? I'm not picking on you, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so we got some that went kind of dormant. You know, you're gonna see it start to go green here as we get some rain. I mean, the soil's concrete, I think, for the next couple weeks till we get some regular rain. But you'll start to see it come back. Probably the most important thing for you is gonna be next spring. You know, come to the lawn class I do in early March and get that thing ready to go for spring. If you go brown, I would absolutely thatch the next spring. I don't know if you guys have ever thatched before, but that's going to give you all the boost you need. Some food, some quick work on the spring, and a good power thatching. You'll have brand new turf. You know, off it goes again. That's part of it. The other part is thatch disease, and that's, you know, I water my grass. I like my green grass. It doesn't take as much water as you think it might to keep it green. But I fight red thread, snow mold, all these different issues that come in now that we are getting cooler nights and shorter days. That's what I'm more worried about with folks, because if we let that go, you're going to have some dead patches through the winter, and then springtime hits. We got to kind of reseed and do some work to get that back. So you could look online. You could probably find some pictures. Red thread would be the perfect one to look up if you wanted to look up a picture like, oh, that's what that is, because I can guarantee you every person in Western Washington has red thread at some time in their turf. You know, fertilizer will help with that. I just did my last 1 dose of food. I only fed my lawn twice this whole year, and it looks beautiful. So once kind of coming out of winter to late spring, and then I do one going into winter. I just did mine. The grass is already flush with nitrogen, and I got no red thread again. Yes, I'll have some back here because I won't use chemicals on it. But come spring, I'll feed it again, and off we go for another season. I won't have a huge amount of repair work to do. The big thing with me right now is, you know, especially if you let it go brown, you're not going to have a lot of moss. Let's worry about that coming out of winter after the nice wet mossy winter again. So we'll do that in March. If you wanted to protect it against red thread, you know, it's going to be sprinkling out something like Infuse. You know, you keep the pets and the kids out of the lawn for the day. We want to get this down off the grass, you know, pretty quickly. So this is not a bad one, you know, to do on a day like today where it's going to rain tomorrow, get it down into the thatch layer. I'm not going to get it on my feet and everywhere else on my kids and the pets kind of thing. So yes, it is chemical, Infuse is, but maybe a little bit safer one, you know, to use to try out there. The other part of this, who's got crane fly? I know the raccoons digging in my lawn tell me I got a couple somewhere. You know, that's a tough one because again, I choose not to, you know, put a, you know, systemic insecticide on the lawn. I'm investigating a couple new things I'm trying this fall. If you come to the lawn class, I'll tell you how they worked for March. But this has been traditionally what we do. It's the same thing as that. We don't want this on the soil surface. We want it in the ground. So this is the one I'd throw out like right before it downpours even, because then you put it out there, the rain, Mother Nature throws it into the soil, you kill the grubs, and you don't have to get it on everything else. So I mean, this is chemical again, but a pretty easy one we're not going to have on the blades of grass to track all over the place for much long. Okay, so disease, crane fly, if you haven't, you know, get some food on it. Organic lawn food's a great way to go. You know, we've got plenty still. We carry that all through the year. I just, like I said, I did mine literally like 10 days ago, and it looks like I got brand new emerald green grass. I mean, the thing looks beautiful here going into winter. But try to get on a 2 or 3 times a year with that organic lawn food will keep everything perfectly green. Fall feed, I think, is a huge one. If you let yours go brown, that's the first thing I'd go to here to make sure that grass has got some energy to get it back alive and green here, so that coming out of winter, we can do a little work on it, and then boom, you've got new grass again. So lawn food, the last bag I brought up because we carry, this is the best lawn food on the market. I'll just show you the bag. It's that BB Stone Nature's Green. I've been using it for years. That's a great lawn food. The last one here is lime. This is lightning lime, which honestly is the only package I've ever found. Right on the back here it says, if you want to change your pH, you know, one digit, this is how much you use, kind of thing. We're not going to turn this into a lawn class, but the biggest issue in Washington is moss, right? Coming out of winter, you got about 50, 60, 80, 99% moss, you know, and the grass kind of peters out. If I lime, you know, that's not a moss killer, but if I lime my grass and I get on this spring fall habit, which I do mine now only once a year, but twice a year to start, you're going to get the pH of the lawn area up from acidity to more neutral conditions, even slightly alkaline. Moss doesn't grow in that, and grass loves it. So you're not going to kill moss with it, but I'm telling you, you know, it took a few years, you know, in my yard, but I had probably 90% moss when we bought our house for a couple years, and I did the quick fix and tried it. Once I started doing that, now I've only got like 3 patches where it should be, where it's absolute deep dark shade, or it's a little wetter in the ground, and that's where the moss should be. So now instead of having to rake and thatch and do the entire turf area, I only have to do a few spots coming out, and now because now my pH has come up a little bit. Okay. Any questions on gut lawn? Yes.
Do you do that at the same time?
Yeah, you could do that at the same time. And again, these are both, we're into the rain, we're getting rainy season. I want it downpouring. I don't want to go water that into my grass anyway, which is why I waited and waited and waited and waited. Finally saw the weather turning here this week and was like, all right, I'm going to do lawn food. It was about 10 days ago. Ran the sprinkler once to soak it down real good and get it in. And now Mother Nature is going to keep flushing it into the soil for me here for the fall. So same with lime. I want that down into the dirt. So if we're doing this in the heat of the summer, you could do it then too, but now you'd really be pumping some water on that to make sure it got down into the soil structure. Okay. Dormant spraying. I brought in our 2 bottles. This is on special too. I will also run this at the pruning class here in a couple weeks for a little special. But anybody dormant spray? You got a couple people. This is the way to go for dormant spray. We get these 2 products in and we can put them together in the exact same sprayer. I want to make sure that's clear. We're into saving time. Who wants to mix one thing, go empty it, clean it, and do another? These are 2 we can put together in a mixture. It's all organic horticultural oil and natural copper, liquid cop. So disease, insect. I kind of get everything with one. Now, I bring this up at this class and the pruning class because I'm not trying to tell you to go buy 10 gallons of it and spray your entire property. That's not what we're talking about. What I would focus on, what did I have issues with this gardening season? Was it the fruit tree with apple scab? Did I have issues with my roses? We can go on and on. If I had a disease or a bug issue, again, I'm going dormant here. I clean up the leaves and get them out of there. I don't want any bad foliage around plants. And I immediately make sure I'm protected with a dormant spray, because this will choke out oil. If I spray oil on, it's going to run and it coats all the cracks and crevices and covers everything. We cut off oxygen between open air and insect egg, larva, whatever it is, you're going to win. The copper, the liquid cop I like because it's an ammonium copper. So this will last, like I could put this on the day when it's dry and it's almost like a shield for 30 days in the rain. So it could rain and rain and rain and rain and it's not going to wash it off. I've got residual. The problem, if not to again turn this into a disease class, but the problem with Washington and a lot of areas is, you take care of yours, the neighbor doesn't. What happens with fungus? It is blowing in the wind and the rain, and it's going from your yard to my yard to her yard to his yard, and everybody gets the same thing. So if I have a shield up, especially coming into spring, I'm going to have a much better chance of keeping that plant clean. Now, I'll say this. I'm not telling anybody to take this home and go spray their yard today. That's not what this is about. This is about, let me save some money, get my 2 bottles, put a note on it, spray when I need to, whatever, and we do this later in the winter. I mean, I never ever spray in bloom, but what I would recommend you do is get the debris cleaned up right now, wait until early February, sometime in that neighborhood, and now we go out and get our spray on, because now we're closer to wake up time, we can protect our foliage a little better, and off we go for another good season in the garden, okay? So, fruit trees, berries, roses would be at the top of the list up here. There's a lot of plants that would benefit by this. It's not going to hurt any of them, but if I want to manage my disease and bugs more naturally and get ahead of the game, that's the way to go. Try to get this on there early, okay? So a little dormant spray. We got to get, we're doing all right. We'll finish here. Fruits and berries, part of it is that dormant spray discussion, why I just put it after it, but the most important thing you could do is make sure they are cleaned up. So again, not today, not next week, but sometime here when we go dormant, mummified fruit, rotten fruit, stuff on the ground, get that all cleaned up and out of the garden. That's where you're going to get your apple maggot fly to come right back on. That's where the apple scab starts again, the mildew, all the prone issues we have with apples and peaches and pears and everything in the garden. Get that stuff cleaned up here this fall. Do your pruning later in winter. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. And then get that dormant spray on there before they bloom. And now I've got a much better chance to manage that stuff going through. It's the exact same with the berries. I have never had to, go nuclear by any means on raspberry, blueberry, that kind of stuff. If we feed them, we take care of them the right way, we do some pruning. Spraying might help me if I did have an issue, but that should be enough to keep you pretty clean on the berry side of it. But again, we're doing this today, late October. This is probably like, make a note for like next late January, early mid-February. We're probably in that time frame, which again, you watch our class schedule, that is exactly when I do the fruit class and the berry class, and we kind of go through those pretty early in the season next year, okay? Over in the vegetable garden, I'm still praying my peas that I neglected to put in on time. I'll still get some pea pods here in a week or so. They're getting close. I got bloom and I got them starting, but I'm hoping the weather doesn't get too cold. So the vegetables might still be going. I mean, there's still vegetables to be picked and still a few weeks here to get them, especially colder crop stuff. But if we're gonna prep that area, you know, your tomatoes, your zucchinis, your cucumbers, your peppers, all that stuff's got to go away here pretty quick. If it's not already done, it's going to be done here after a week of rain and a couple of cold nights. All that can go away. If we empty out that garden for the winter, you know, there's some things you can do to help get ready for that spring planting when we go back to March and start to put in carrots and peas and beets and a lot of the cold weather things again for 2023. So mulching it would be an easy one. You know, get some good compost. I would put lime down always on my vegetable garden. All those creatures love sweet alkaline soil, love high calcium. That'll help you with disease, especially on tomatoes. That will help you coming out next year. If I had a vegetable garden, I got 2 huge raised ones. I just built 2 new ones this summer. They will be getting lime on them, and I'll probably cover them with either all the clean leaves from my large dogwood tree and some maples and mulch them with some leaf debris, or I'll just put compost on there to protect the soil this winter. Then in spring, I can scrape off the compost, turn it over, mix it up, add some more lime, do all my fertilizing, and then off we go for another season. So that, the other option is who's just cover crop. Anybody do cover crops? Sometimes I do too. Sometimes the cover crops cover a little bit more than you want them to cover. It was kind of my issue. But that's another option. I mean, a lot of farmers, that's what you do to save your soil. You know, I'm going to produce something that grows in the colder season, whether it's vetch, you know, crimson clover, fava bean. There's a whole bunch of choices you'll find out there that I can let grow during the colder winter months till spring. Then I can turn that soil over there and I've got all that nitrogen debris to help boost the soil come springtime, okay? So one of those two, you know, I have done cover crops for a couple seasons. My clover that I put in got a little out of hand and started invading my garden and the lawn that was next to the old vegetable garden. So I quit the crimson clover, but it's something to think about, you know, especially if you've got a large in-ground patch. That may be a good choice to kind of protect that soil for the winter, add a little bit of nutrients, turn that over, and then off we go for another vegetable season. I do want to mention roses real quick. Like I said, we'll have rose classes always right around Valentine's Day in February, and we'll talk about a little of this then too. But my rule for roses would always be hip high in the fall, knee high come spring. Now that's not climbing roses. We're not going to butcher our climbing rose that finally made it up the arbor down to my knee every year. That's not that. But shrub roses, hybrid teas, any of that stuff, a good pruning. You've got to clean them up. You'll walk out in a month and go, still has a little flower coming out and there's still leaves on it. It's not the end of the world, but we need to get down to a comfortable height so that I don't have breakage, snow, wind. That rose is a little protected going into winter. Then we fast, that's Veterans Day to me. So you got probably 3-4 weeks here, sometime mid-late November. President's Weekend, mid-February, that's when I'm gonna go out and say, okay, you are starting over one way or another, stripping the leaves off, cutting them down a little more, feeding them, getting that first energy dose down, and then off we go for the season, okay? So always remember that kind of Veterans Day, President's Weekend, you do a little bit of both, you'll have happy roses. And that's the poster child, like I've said 8 times already. Clean your leaves up, because I can, if you're honest as a gardener, yeah, I got some black spot, yeah, I had a little mildew. You don't want that stuff sitting on there because you'll have it right back on come springtime, okay? Protecting tender specimens. Now these are some plants, you mentioned gardenia a little bit ago, that maybe we shouldn't have in our yard that we like to grow in a pot, and I'll raise my hand because this is what I do all the time, that probably aren't going to care for a cold night, you know, that we got to be a little more careful with. Is it, you know, something we bring in, I call it garage plant, house plant, greenhouse plant, basement plant, you can call it whatever you want, but it could be anything from I'm not paying for geraniums next year. I want to keep my fuchsia for another season. You know, there's a lot of plants you could store in a cold basement. If you got a greenhouse, great, you can do whatever you want. But in the cold basement, in the garage, where I can cut it way back, keep it barely alive, and then perhaps have it for 2023 to come back again. So there's a lot of stuff that could be included in that discussion, and I don't want to spend a huge amount of time, but if you can grab me after class or one of the staff, if you're interested in trying to save this or that or the next thing, let's talk about a specific plant, and then we can maybe get you a tip or two to try to save them for another season. You know, I'll throw my mother under the bus. I don't know how long she's had the same red zonal geranium going in a box in her yard, probably upwards of 20 years now. And I keep telling her, Mom, I know where to get some good new ones. I'd be happy to bring you a fresh geranium if you want to start over again. But it's I think it's the challenge sometimes, like, I'll get that to come back no matter what you say. So she saves her money and has her red geranium again that way, right? You know, we're at the cusp of winter here. You know, this is transplanting dividing time. So I try to tell gardeners, do not do this stuff unless we have to during the growing season. You know, sometimes you're adding onto the deck, or you got to have a contractor come do some work, and he's like, well, I don't care what you say, that shrub's got to get moved, or the contractor's going to run over it with his track hoe, and I got to buy another one. All right, that's a different situation. We try to do everything we can to preserve it. If I want to save something, move something, chop something, you got near 100% success. You know, after we get a frost here, a few more weeks, all the way up till March. I mean, if you're going to move something, just do it then. You know, you're going to have near 100% success. So maybe, you know, walk around for a minute in the yard right now while it's still full of foliage and everything's not gone, and go, you know, that would look better over here. That's a little crowded. I didn't give enough room for this. I got too many of these. You know, whatever it is, very easy to do here in the winter. Yeah, it's a little wet and rainy to be outside working, but it's also nice, easy soil when it's wet, and you'll get near 100% success transplanting. I would just show you, if you're going to do that, you know, we don't ever want to put a lot of fertilizer down in the fall. We're not feeding plants going into winter. We want things to harden off, and then we'll feed you coming out of winter. But if I'm going to move something, I'm just going to get a nice, easy, gentle, organic transplanter like Sure Start. You know, I put that down a little bit when I plant in the new hole. Sweet, root system's happy. You know, if you had a magic camera underneath the soil, I think most people would be shocked how much root development happens over the winter. Yeah, the top's doing nothing, but I'm still getting root system to establish, and that gets me a little bit ahead for the next season, okay? And I'll show you one other thing. This looks like a Conan the Barbarian weapon if you like old Arnold movies. But that is a, you know, like, what am I going to do with that thing? This is a sweet shovel. I show these at a couple classes. I don't have a lot left, so hopefully not 20 people go there and want one today. We'll have more coming. They call this the root slayer. And I'm telling you, if you're going to divide perennials, chop some roots, whatever it is, this is an all-in-one tool. You be real careful. You'll take your toes off if you chop down on the end there. But I mean, I can turn this sideways and saw root. It cleaves hostas and I mean all kinds of stuff. So easy. I've been using this now for quite a few years when this first came out, and I think that's the shovel. It's not a cheap, what are they up to here? I should have a price on it. I think they're 60 bucks, 70 bucks. But you'll have that forever, and that is a time saver, I'm telling you. That's a great shovel. Yeah, root slayer is the way to go. All right, so transplanting, you know, kind of the same, you know, falls for planting. You know, everything's on special still. Half price yard, you know, probably half of my yard came out of half price department at White's and Sunnyside after 20 years of White's too. You get some great value. A lot of times if you're a gardener, you go back there and say, yeah, that coneflower is pretty much looks like it's done, but you're not buying this. I want the root system because I got twice as nice of a plant for next year. So it's a great time to plant. You know, there's not as many plants around this late in the fall, but whatever you know you want, I grab it and get it in the ground. You're going to be ahead of a year for next year. A lot of times you get a great price on it in the fall, and you're going to get a superior established plant instead of something for next year. And with the rain, warm soil coming out of winter, I mean, it's an ideal time to put a lot of stuff in the ground too. They've tried this for my whole life, 30 years in nurseries, you know, fall is for planting. That is the honest truth. I mean, I wish the whole season was swapped. Everybody comes in here and wants everything in April and May, which is great, and it's still a good time to plant. But man, if that was the September, October, you'd probably be that much more ahead of the game for the next season, because it's a superior time to put stuff in. You know, fall pruning, I put on there because somebody admittedly asked me, like, can I go home and cut my boxwood hedge? Can I go rip my laurel apart? Can I do this? No, 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 and no. We're not pruning this late in the year. So if it's evergreen, you're walking away. I'm sorry to tell you, you're asking for trouble if you go out and prune back an evergreen plant in the fall. We're gonna wait, put the freezer, or put the pruners on ice. I'll come pick them up next year. We're gonna do this coming out of winter. It's not the end of the world if you didn't get to it. I wouldn't take a chance of doing any pruning, rhodie, azalea, you name it. Either you're gonna cut your flower buds off and have no bloom next year, or B, you're gonna get, oh sweet, the weather's nice here in fall, it'll start to regrow, and then wham, we get the first frost, and you're gonna have to back and prune it again come springtime. So I see it every year driving to work on the boulevard. Same dude goes out and shears his laurel hedge mid-October, and every year it is brown and brown and brown, and he's got to wait till next May before it's back to green again. So walk away from the pruners on evergreen. Deciduous stuff, after we start, sap starts flowing just a few weeks away, yeah, we can start attacking any of that stuff here over the dormant months of the winter. That's the class I'll be doing here in a couple weeks. If you want to come talk pruning for winter, we'll be doing that specifically at that class. So the last couple honestly have to do with mulching. You know, bark, compost, whatever your favorite thing is, straw. There's a zillion different things we can mulch with. And this is a great time to do that. I mean, if you're going to mulch the garden, it's always either fall or early spring for me, depending on the season. You know, there's nothing wrong with bark. There's nothing wrong with compost. Compost is bark after 5 more years. It's degraded down to a really fine structure, far superior instantly for the garden, to be honest with you. This is going to add to my soil. This is going to take away from it for a couple years before it adds to it, okay, if that makes sense. So if I use bark, I mean, I'm not be a bark hater. I don't usually put bark down very much, but if I did, I would go grab a bag of lawn food, organic lawn food, or an organic all-purpose fertilizer. I would put that down on the entire bed and soil, and then put my bark over the top of it. Because now, as that wood is rotting, it's taking that fertilizer up to help the decomposition. If you put this around a bunch of plants with no food on them, next year you're going to have a lot of yellowy, light green, off-color plants, because this is decomposing, taking the nitrogen out of your soil and away from the plant. Does that make sense? So again, bark's a lot cheaper, you know, sometimes than good quality compost is. They're both very beneficial. You can take your pick. I would just say if you're going to go heavy on the bark, especially heavy, most guys I see put bark down are 3-4 inches deep. Get some food down underneath it, because that'll help.
What kind of food?
If it was to me, the easy thing is get something, you just want nitrogen, like an organic lawn food, or, you know, any organic all-purpose fertilizer, you know, something with a little nitrogen in it. It's going to counteract that bark decomposing effect.
What about wood chips? Same.
Same thing. You know, I just did my entire back with cedar chips, and I love it. It smells delicious too. And I'm not going to grow. Most of it was for my boys to thrash, so I'm not going to grow anything in most of it. So I didn't put food down in the play part of it. In the garden part of it, yes, because I'm going to go back and have new raised vegetable gardens and some other stuff in there too. Yeah. So compost. You know, I'm going to say, because this is the best deal I've ever done. I'm trying to get people to use either one of these. You buy compost, you got 40% off, which is like double any discount I've ever done on compost. So bags, bales, all organic, and the bark is on 40 as well. So this will be the whole week through Friday. Take advantage of it. But if you were a smart gardener, I would buy compost and even hoard some behind the house, because you're going to need it at some point. There's probably 7 or 8 bales behind my house at all times, and every time I get low, I just go buy 5 more, because you use it for everything in the garden. And at 40 off, that's a great price. I mean, you're basically buying it for wholesale. How's that, for honest truth? So compost 40 off, and the bark is 40 off as well. Okay, so think about mulching. You know, we talked a little bit about what perennials to cut back. The dahlias, do we dig them? What do we leave in the ground? in my yard, all of that stuff, all the above, gets amount of compost this fall. When I go through and clean up my garden, cut back the perennials, if dahlias, all the stuff I know needs a little help, that gets big handfuls of compost over the top, spread out into a nice maybe 1.5-foot circle. And now I know I've got that protected a little bit for winter. Then come March, I can take my gloves, spread that compost into a little donut, kind of a moat around there, take my rose and flower food, take my rhodie food, whatever plant it is, put my organic fertilizer around that plant, take that compost, cover it right back up, and now I'm ready to go for spring. You know, I'm not having to do it. So if I don't do it in the fall, I'll be doing the same thing in spring, one way or another, to add a little bit of nutrition, mulch that plant again, and lock that fertilizer down. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah.
But how much compost do you put in your vegetable gardens?
Well, if you had a couple inches down, it's probably plenty to protect the soil. I'd probably go more like 3 or 4. If it's leaf debris, a little bit more than that, because it's gonna suck
and
down.
What about straw? How does that play into the picture?
You know, straw. This is brand new, so this literally came this week. I was at a show down about 2 weeks ago down in Nevada. There's our big annual trade show. We kind of look at all the new products. I've always hated bringing straw in because it's typically from the local farm and it's all covered mold and mildew and it stinks and it's just a mess. I saw this and was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I dug through some bags of it and was like, it's all recycled wheat and it's absolutely clean. I mean, it's really consistent. So I mean, it's not cheap. You know, if you're gonna go, a special plant, I'll probably take a bag home here. That's probably what's gonna go a little mounds around my dahlias and a couple things. I'm gonna try it out and see if it does any different. It's going to degrade into compost just like everything else does.
I mean, it's good for strawberries.
Yeah, exactly. Strawberries would be another one. I took mine out of the bed and put them in pots, so I'll see. I might stuff some in the pockets, kind of thing. But it's another option. We have a lot of people that ask. I brought the other one I brought up here is this. You can't see what's in there, but that's on 20% off as well. So that's hazelnuts. Another thing that we can recycle really easily. It all comes out of either Northwest Washington, up there, Linden is where we get ours, or state of Oregon is filled with hazelnuts. But most of my plant growers, that is their compost. I get plants in from any grower in Oregon right now. It's either rice hulls, recycled rice hulls, or it's filbert shells, because it's woody, it'll last a while. It makes great mulch. I mean, that's one also. I think you'll get a little bit of slug deterrence, if you want my honest truth, out of the filbert shells. They're not going to want to climb across that kind of woody, uneven surface a little bit. I think you'll help with the slugs a little bit as well on the filberts.
And just the straw, if you put the straw in your garden,
Yep.
will that compost over the year?
Exactly, yeah. But by the time you get to spring, it'll probably look like dirt. Yeah, you're just going to mix it right into the soil and off we go for another season. Yeah, really easy. So real quick, just to review, I think we probably went through all the only thing I didn't show you was, let's say you wanted to extend your vegetable garden maybe a few more extra weeks. Look at some of the harvest guards. This Rime fabric, it's something you can save year to year. It never goes bad. But we have row covers. They're like 5 foot by 25, or sometimes this might help with that zone 8 plant, that's out in the yard. It's like, holy smokes, the Arctic blast is coming down, what they call it, the polar vortex, right, a couple years ago. It's going to be cold this week. Well, here's a bigger sheet. I could walk out, and if something I had, in the garden was a little tender, or one of my containers, I could help wrap this, because we don't want to use plastic ever. It's got to be something that's a little bit breathable, that'll let some air and some light through. So Rime might be an option for you as well. So if you look at today, so we always do discount with class. I got to try to remember everything we put on sale, because I tried to pick some fun stuff. Because like I said, I appreciate you guys coming down here, because this is one of those classes is like, oh cool, look at all the cool plants you're showing us. This is kind of like, who wants to talk about weeding and slugs and mulching and all the garden projects? So we obviously care about your yard, so that's a great thing. So compost 40% off, bag or bale. Bark 40% off. Okay, if you want to try some filbert nuts, I have some bags left. We'll have more of that coming out of winter again. We get one big load from a farm, a place called Holmquist Hazelnuts up in Linden sends that down to us. That's on 20% off. The dormant sprays is a sweet deal at 20 off, and this will be at the pruning class too. If you don't want to do it today and you're coming to pruning, this is for sure will be something we'll talk about a little more at the pruning class as well. Okay. So I think that should get you all the discounts. So I will be home next weekend going to my 2 boys soccer games for the weekend again, but I'll be back in 2 weeks, the last classes of the year. Okay, so Halloween weekend, next weekend, there'll be a houseplant video posted up. It won't be a live class down here, but we'll have a houseplant video set up for everybody to watch on the website. First weekend in November is the pruning weekend, so I'll be doing evergreen perennials, which we've always done a hellebore class. Who likes hellebores? I'll raise both my hands. It used to be just hellebores, and we do survey every year, and everybody's like, why is he always talking about hellebores? Talk about some other evergreen perennials. So we'll be talking about hellebores, heucheras, berginia, lavender, rosemary, a bunch of other things as well in that evergreen perennial class. And then the last one of the year is winter pruning. That's a popular one. We'll be going through some serious pruning tips, kind of getting ready to when do we want to attack stuff over the winter. And then we do that same winter pruning class in January, because a lot of people were like, will you please do it at both ends of the winter, because I forgot what you said in November. I'll come back in January and do it then. So so we'll have that as well. So thanks for coming. We got any questions?
Could I ask this too?
Yeah.
As far as the peonies and the irises.
Yep. Cut those off. I mean,
Okay.
iris is an easy one because typically they get a little tired late winter anyway. You're probably almost there.
Right.
Being a bulb, just keep in mind, it's not just iris, but don't ever cut green bulbs off. If I'm still green, I'm storing energy into my rhizome or tuber or bulb or corm or whatever, so that I can give you maximum effect the next season. So wait till it goes yellow-brown and you do whatever you want. I think the peony, I'll speak for me, I got a lot of peonies in my yard. It's another one of my plant addictions. I think it's one of the prettiest fall colors in my whole yard. When peonies are going orange, red, yellow, I got some really sweet peonies, so I'm not interested in cutting those off just yet, but they're gonna go from red, yellow, orange to melted brown in probably the next couple weeks. And then yes, we just scoop those up and throw them off. I don't mulch my cottage type peonies, if you know what I mean, like herbaceous, they disappear totally. I mulch my Ito. I have a lot of Japanese peonies that have woody out of the ground, or tree peonies would be the same thing. Sometimes we'll get a pretty good mound of compost on those for the winter. Years I didn't, I got wood dye back and had to start out from a little smaller plant. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
What do you do about strawberries?
Strawberries. Same thing. You have a patch or pots?
I have a bed.
Okay.
A big raised bed.
Okay.
I got no strawberries this year. They're lush. They sent out so many runners.
Okay.
I keep cutting them back, and they just keep sending them out.
Okay. Well, okay. So I'm not going to pick on it, but there's two problems with that conversation. So strawberry is a plant. We have mother plants, 3 years, and they're done.
I just planted them. I've never.
This year?
Last spring.
Last spring. Okay. Don't cut your runners off anymore, because that's my plant that goes and goes and goes, and the old one is the one I pitch after a couple seasons.
But so I've got it in a raised bed.
Yep.
And they're all coming down.
Down
and
the
they're
edge. Oh, okay. So yeah, you can tidy those up.
Around that way,
Exactly.
not
That's
on the
fine.
inside.
Yeah, on the inside, let them make some babies, because you want those to keep the population going down the road. If we didn't get a lot of fruit, and it's not birds, you didn't see them starting, they didn't bloom.
And they get watered. They're irrigated.
Okay, so try a big heavy dose of fruit berry vine food coming out of winter, and I would not go bark, sawdust, I wouldn't do any of that. I get compost and get that whole bed mulched over the top of that food coming out of winter. If you have, what I would do this fall, like immediately, the same thing I'll do to mine. Again, I'm on the other side of the OCD, so you don't have to be this crazy, but I mean, every yellow, brown, dead twig, rotten berry, it is gone before I go to winter, because that, to me, is one of the poster childs for slugs and for other stuff hanging out, and then I got the same problem next
Put a
year.
bunch of blood meal on it in the spring.
Yeah, blood's a great. I mean, that's pure nitrogen, and that might be actually part of the problem, because if nitrogen's all about foliage. With that fruitberry vine, you got to up your phosphorus and your potassium. That's bud, bloom, fruit production. The nitrogen's going to give me all kinds of beautiful green leaves and plants, but not much else.
Produce
Yeah.
them like crazy, but
Yeah.
not a berry to be
So try that next year, because you should be getting, you know, I should probably admit I didn't do enough to my strawberries this summer, and I still got plenty. I didn't spend as much time as usual on mine, but
What'd you say to put on potassium and?
well, any good organic food, but it's not, you know, she said blood meal. That's all nitrogen. There's nothing else in there but that. You'd almost the opposite. Bone meal would be the opposite end of that. Now we're all about bud and bloom. But if you get fruit berry vine food, we carry it in their little purple EB Stone, same pouch. That's going to have a little more balanced formula. I think you'll get better production on the
When
strawberry.
you put that on like your raspberries and your
Exactly.
blueberries.
Raspberry, grape, blueberry. We want roadie food. Always remember that when I do the berry class. You want acid for blueberry. The other ones don't mind being neutral, but you would get roadie food for your blueberry.
And not till spring.
And yeah, what you do, again right now, you know, the good thing with organic is it's not so water soluble. But you're not going to have any roots asking for food until we get coming out of winter at this point. So wait and do it towards the end, then you get 100% of the benefit.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Trevor.
Cut you loose. Yeah. Thanks for coming in again.